The global population is aging faster than ever before in history. This demographic shift will have a tremendous impact on almost all aspects of societies around the world, scientifically, socially, and economically. In this opening plenary session, Aging, the Grand Challenge, our panel of leading experts will offer diverse perspectives on how to embrace both the challenges and opportunities of this new era of aging. Please welcome Kate Bingham, Managing Partner, SV Health Investors, Luigi Ferrucci, Scientific Director, National Institute of Aging of NIH, Paul Irving, Chairman, Milken Institute Center for the Future of Aging, Distinguished Scholar in Residence, USC Davis School of Gerontology, and Session Leader, Mikhail Preminger, Regional Head, Johnson & Johnson Innovation East North America.
Welcome again, everyone, to the Healthy Aging Forum 2022 and to this opening session, Aging, the Grand Challenge. My name is Mikhail Preminger. I head Johnson & Johnson Innovation in East North America, and I'm pleased to moderate this session in which our plan would be to give you and set the stage for this meeting by discussing the key issues, double click on some of the challenges related to healthy aging, touch on the progress that has been made in the field and what we hope for the future. We hope to not only provide you with important information, but also trigger your curiosity about what's coming on the agenda in the upcoming sessions. We're also very fortunate to be joined today by three prominent and accomplished leaders whose combined perspectives, informed by unique roles in the healthy aging ecosystem, can come together to provide a holistic view of the field. So I'm pleased to kick off the session by inviting each one of you, Kate, Luigi, and Paul, to introduce yourselves.
I can start. Luigi Ferrucci. I am a geriatrician and an epidemiologist. My position currently, I am the scientific director of the National Institute of Aging in Baltimore, from the National Institute of Health in the United States. And my interest is studying the process by which older age lead to disability, both physical and cognitive, and to identify targets that could be used to prevent such a decline.
Thank you, Luigi. Kate, please go ahead.
So, hi, thank you. So my interest as a venture capitalist is looking at all the different mechanisms that contribute to human aging, and to explore whether or not there are specific pharmaceutical interventions that can actually address that. So I think one of the key focuses that we spend time on at SV is in the field of dementia. And so that's one of the areas that I am very interested in this topic.
Thank you, Kate. And Paul, let me invite you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mikhail. Great to be with all of you. I'm Paul Irving. I'm chairman and founder of the Milken Institute Center for the Future of Aging, and also have a faculty position at the University of Southern California, Leonard Davis School of Gerontology. My principal interest is changing the narrative, is recognizing the potential and possibility of healthy longevity and the stakes that all of us have in investing in this remarkable opportunity that we have ahead of us.
Thank you so much, Paul, for making this introduction. So to get us started, I would like to invite you, Luigi, to share with us a little bit of the backdrop for this. So in the opening session, we heard about the general problem. We got an opportunity to experience a little bit of the sense of urgency that is felt about what is going on. If I can actually ask you to set the stage for us, but by sharing how we got here, actually, what has led us to this crisis?
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I think that, I'll start by saying that almost 50 years ago, somebody told me that I needed to study aging. I was almost a child because aging of the population was the power that will change everything in our society, from the family structure to our economy, to healthcare, to the way we organize our society. And so I became interested very, very early. And what really strikes me is that we are the victim of our success. The aging of the population should be considered as something that we did incredibly well, because instead of experiencing mortality at the age of 20 and 30, we live a long life because we have done something to provoke this. But this success came with some side effects. And we are now facing, this complication that I don't think is unsurmountable, but are very, very important that we understand where they come from. And to make a very long story short, I think that a very, rough trait, this demographic transformation started with the improvement of the living condition, the availability of water, the availability of food, that generated the more and more people that used to die at the age of 1 or at the age of 10 starting to survive. And so they went on and lived for a longer time. And so the population expanded, and the population of aging on overall expanded. And that also was paired by the fact that people tended to start living in cities. And, the urbanization was also a very important social phenomenon there. But the side effect was that because they didn't need anymore such large families that would work in their factories and in their, then the fertility rate started going down. So you can imagine that you reduce mortality, you reduce fertility, and you have this expansion of the population that let's say it's a success, but generated a lot of problems. Later on, and more recently, our success comes from the discovery of medical ability to treat disease. The prevention, especially the prevention of cardiovascular disease, really generated a much larger survival for older people. So instead of increasing survival at the early part of life, we expand the survival at the late part of life. So many more people survive to very, very old age, driving the increased prevalence of chronic disease, but the fertility also tended to go down even more. And in these centuries, we are at the turning point where there are much more people that the population starts shrinking because there is an excess reduction in fertility compared to mortality. So in many countries, we see in the future the shrinking of the population and a change in the population structure, where there will be a lot more older people than younger people. Because of that, our only hope is that we will transform our older age community in a community of people that are strong, that can live, they can enjoy life, they can be productive. And so working on this goal is really the great challenge of our century. If we cannot do that, the transformation, a demographic transformation, will create problems that we will not be able to afford.
Thank you, Luigi. I think this is a wonderful segue to actually focusing on the specific challenges that come with that reality that you just described. And so let me invite you, Kate, and then Paul, and maybe back to you, Luigi, too, to comment on what you see from your vantage point as the most important challenges related to healthy aging and the road to extending health span and sustained resilience. I'm sure you will be talking about some of those terms in your address. So Kate, happy to.
Thank you, Michelle. So for me, what I think is interesting is to try and understand the underlying processes of the different drivers of basically what's molecular and cellular damage. So you've got the accumulation of these changes, which is resulting in increased diseases. And we need to understand the different processes that are driving the diseases so that we can either slow down or stop or reverse the effects of those damages, whether it's molecular or cellular. And that's so that we can actually treat the underlying mechanisms that are causing the diseases associated with aging, rather than just trying to treat individual diseases. And although we talk about, you know, dementia as a sort of holistic condition, actually it's obviously made up of a whole bunch of different conditions, and it's really almost a syndrome, and we've just got to unpick it all and understand what are the different drivers. And it's obviously made way more complex in this area because you've got multiple different disease mechanisms going on at the same time, which is driving what is commonly seen as the multimorbidity. So I think you've got a lot of different mechanisms operating at different speeds, operating on different cells and tissues at the same time. And we don't have good translational models. So again, if I use dementia as an example, one of the challenges has been that I think, you know, mice have been easy to use in lots of different clinical indications, but actually a mouse brain is very different from a human brain, and we don't have a good way of actually modeling what's going on from a translational perspective in humans. And that's, for me, is probably the single biggest challenge, that translational process from identifying mechanisms through to identifying what the biomarkers are in humans to then start monitoring what effects a pharmaceutical intervention may have.
Thank you, Kate. I think you're describing the complexity of the problem, and maybe I'll introduce here the term geroscience hypothesis for the audience, which is this idea that if we could intervene in the mechanisms that lead to aging, we will prevent actually the diseases that are associated with aging. And we could do this in a singular approach to actually prevent those multiple comorbidities. So I'm sure we'll touch on this again during the conversation. Let me turn to you, Paul, and hear a little bit from you. I think you have a slightly different focus.
A slightly different focus. So Kate is absolutely right, and I know we're going to be discussing as we move on today multiple morbidities, the question about whether aging is disease, et cetera. But I want to go back, if I can, to Luigi's comments and maybe add a bit more context. So I think the challenge for all of us is understanding what I often call the longevity paradox, and that is this remarkable achievement, probably the greatest achievement in the history of humankind, and that is the rough doubling of average lifespans in the last century or so. We've just in the last several decades, you know, we've added 10, 20, 30 years to average lives, and we have no idea what to do with these additional years, which is kind of remarkable. So, as I often say, thinking about this from the perspective of a social scientist, you know, science, people like Luigi have done their part. It's people like me who've failed. And so the question is what are we going to do with these additional years, and how do we turn this really fascinating demographic shift from what so many call a silver tsunami into a golden opportunity? And what that is going to involve is a new narrative, which many of us are working on in many ways, whether it's the WHO or the National Academy of Medicine or others, and a promotion of healthy longevity, new opportunities for work and purpose, lifelong learning, a change in intergenerational relationships. We'll talk more about some of these things as we move along, but I think the great challenge for us is thinking about really every institution, public and private, in the world in a new way, in a way that none of our forebears could have anticipated. A brand new age demography for the world. And that's incredibly exciting. And by the way, if we succeed, that will mean more investment in as you described it, Mikhail, geroscience, bioscience. It'll mean more focus on prevention and wellness. It'll mean more innovation and more opportunity for more people to live meaningful, healthy, and better lives. So the stakes are high and the opportunities are great, and we have a lot of work to do.
What an important perspective, Paula. I think you're bringing the perspective of purpose and the social aspects of aging as equally important problems, maybe more, or challenges or opportunities. And this is definitely something that I would love the audience to take as we conclude this discussion. So thank you for making sure that we're all aware and thinking about this. And Luigi, back to you. I'm sure you have a lot to add to this discussion.
What a great perspective, Paul. I think that, yeah, I mean, that's probably really the great challenge, you know. And I think that, you know, following what Kate said, you know, there's accumulation of damage that put all the people at high risk of developing multiple chronic disease. And some of them are really disastrous to the quality of life of people. But we do know that aging, it's really a fight, a continuous fight between damage accumulation and resilience strategy that have been evolving across millions of years. So that, you know, if you go deep into the biology, you know, the damage of the DNA, the damage to protein have counteracted by incredibly beautiful and well-characterized mechanisms that counteract this effect. And we need to learn what they are, and we need to learn how to reinforce them. And when we do an intervention, we really need to target them, because those are the natural mechanisms that biology put in place to preserve healthy aging. Let me say one more thing. You know, we have divided life in periods, in segments. You know, that, you know, you're a child, a teenager, and then your working time, and then you retire, and then you are the oldest old. And that is really a problem, because we do know that there is no solution continuity between these very different periods. And if we start conceptualizing life as a life course perspective from childhood in our educational system, knowing that what you do now, we do know that the events that characterize childhood are reflected in the trajectories of aging. That may be the secret of understanding dementia is during what happened in pregnancy. If we start conceptualizing that, then we prepare ourselves what come later instead of completely ignoring them. If you ask to a teenager what's going to happen when you're older, they have no idea what to tell you. And that is a cultural shift that needs to occur in a more positive society toward the aging process.
Yeah.
Luigi, I agree with what you say, and the idea of being able to sort of harness the body's own immune system to cure disease, since that's already evolved and that's how nature has done it, I think there will be an increasing shift to therapeutics in that way. And one example I've got in the portfolio at SV is a UK company called Alchemab, which basically takes groups of resilient individuals. So whether or not they're long-term survivors of cancer or older people who've been, you know, drinking, smoking, or have genetic risk factors, but finding those resilient individuals that are resisting disease, and then looking at, well, what could be the reasons that they are not suffering, or in the case of long-term cancer survivors, look at B-cell sequencing and look at actually pulling out antibodies to identify potentially therapeutic protective antibodies with an unbiased approach. So I think that sort of approach, I think, is going to be pretty interesting, because those are not individuals that would normally show up in clinical trials by definition, because they are healthy and well. even though, as you profile them, they shouldn't be.
Yeah. Actually, this is thank you, Kate, for injecting this example. This is a good segue to a question that I thought it would be enjoyable to debate here a little bit. And this is really relating to how we approach aging, whether it is helpful to think about aging as a disease from an intervention perspective, from a drug development perspective, and of course, what are the implications of such definition from a societal perspective? So happy to invite some comments on this question that I think has multiple implications to it. I don't know if maybe Luigi, do you want to start?
Well, let me start, and then this will be a very interesting discussion. Are we going to cure chronic disease one by one, or are we going to address the biological mechanisms of aging? And I think that, I'll give you my perspective. I think that from 2 points of view. One is, if you think about the epidemiology and the clinical event that are occurring now, we have seen a dramatic reduction of mortality and morbidity by cardiovascular disease. There is a substantial decline of mortality from cancer that will be even more accelerated as the immunotherapy of cancer start being more popular. But what we have not seen at all is an improvement in the living condition and quality of life of people that are old and affected by multiple morbidity and disability. We have completely failed them. We don't know how to address them. And so clearly our approach to cure a single disease did not work there. And my old predecessor, Nathan Schock in 1958, when founded the Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging, wanted to distinguish normal aging from disease. This is a very old question, 1958. But, over time, we have realized that that question is not the right question, because as our tools and technology improve, we can really find a really distinction, a very clear-cut distinction between the transition from health to disease. And I wanted to meditate on that, because that changed everything. From aging being a curiosity, almost an anthropological science, to aging being the fundamental, part of medicine. We do not understand the effect of biological aging on chronic disease. We will not improve the quality of life of those people with multimorbidity and disability. And so we will fail the most expanding portion of our population of patients.
Thank you, Luigi. Kate, maybe just injecting a little bit, just to expand on this, and Paul, will get to you because I know you have a lot to say about this. Just from a clinical trial perspective, kind of the mechanics, I know that you have a lot of interest in kind of novel designs and approaches. Do you want to just speak to that?
Yeah, I think the issue on the clinical trials is what we typically do when we run clinical trials is to have as narrow a definition as possible for the patients that you include in the trials, because you want to get a very clear signal as to whether or not the particular mechanism you're targeting is actually safe and is it working. So we explicitly exclude multiple morbidities, and we want to get as narrow a inclusion as possible. And those are typically, again, from an investor perspective, short-term trials, because we want to get an early answer before we would then, double down. So I think the real question is, how can both the individuals and the companies developing drugs, as well as the regulators, actually embrace the idea of multiple morbidities and approve trials which target multiple conditions. And that will mean, if moving there will mean we need novel trial endpoints, we'll need novel biomarkers that actually represent a clear quantified measure of aging. And where I think we will likely end up is getting drugs approved on the back of different mechanisms, much in the ways we have with cancer, where we're seeing drugs now getting approved based on different mechanistic drivers of disease, rather than what is the organ in which the initial cancer is identified.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. So in some ways we see that adopting a disease approach could benefit our ability to mobilize. Paul, I know that you would not feel very comfortable with that, so to hear your perspective.
I know that I'm in the minority here, but I feel strongly, so I'm gonna use my minority status as a platform. I would implore my friends in the scientific community to remember that words count, and that aging, getting old, is about more than cognitive loss, decline, diminishment, lack of capacity, chronic disease, and death. It's also about wisdom and experience and contribution, and ultimately the economy of the future. I want you to think about the messages that defining aging as disease mean, as opposed to aging as risk factor for disease. The WHO, by the way, defines ageism as one of the great public health challenges globally of our time. Older adults are already sidelined, subjected to policies and practices and norms that sideline them, that disable their ability to engage productively and to continue to learn and produce and engage in purposeful lives. Within the scientific community, I totally get it. I'm not naive to the realities, and I think none of us who do the work I do are. But as I say, words matter, and the way scientists think about aging affects not just science. It affects policy, it affects business practice, it affects the broader culture, it affects media, and most importantly, it affects the way individuals and families think about their own life course. So just something to consider from the minority.
Yeah, actually, I feel that around this Zoom matrix, we have much more agreement than disagreement. I think that everyone is united by a common purpose and mission to improve the condition. And if we need to use different methodologies and converge them, I think this is a great group that can influence that. But it is, with that, maybe let's talk a little bit about the future. So the United Nations has defined this decade as the healthy aging decade. And with that time frame in mind, maybe I can ask you to fast forward to 2030 and try to predict what we will see happen in this field of healthy aging in 2030. And maybe you can use this opportunity also to point to some progress that is made or has been made and is in the process of being made that will get us there. So I don't know if anyone wants to jump in. I'm happy to nominate, but if anyone wants.
So something we've been doing, Michelle, in dementia is to try and quantify the behavioral changes that are the symptoms that are typically first presented when an individual goes to a doctor. So it's about memory and mood and behavior and sleep and all the sorts of things that are the immediate presentations of what could be a dementia diagnosis. So those early diagnostics to define before you get severe symptoms, I think, is something that we're going to see a huge change over the next 10 years. So to predefine those who are most at risk before they actually start displaying those symptoms. So I think what we're going to see again in dementia is going to be, I think, like cancer, where you're going to start getting much better dissection of the biology that's driving disease, and therefore ability to stratify patients. And that's going to be heavily driven by diagnostics. But I'd love to just turn the table back to you, Michelle, to tell us a little bit about the work you've been doing at J&J about early detection, and how do you identify those patients and do work there?
Yeah, thank you, Kate. I think you're pointing to a very important element in medicine in general and in quality of life, which is early detection and disease interception, which I think will be the strategy here, minus the word disease. That's for you, Paul. And so I think that what we've seen happening in the field of medicine is that we are learning from one area where we may have better access or better a sense of urgency. And I think you mentioned cancer, and that is definitely a field in which we are implementing an early detection and interception approach that kind of defies the normal paradigms in which we wait for disease to develop and then we know how to treat it. So we too are taking a very novel approach that requires shifts in technology, of course, and biology and approaches, but also from a regulatory perspective, and developing both medical devices and molecular approaches for that early detection and intervention. We're focused on lung cancer and other types of cancer mostly at this point, but I'm optimistic and I'm proud actually of the work that we do, because I think those tools that are being developed in that context will be expanded into other fields and will serve us. Already we're applying them in other disease areas, and I hope we can do that in the broad field of aging within the next decade, going up to 2030. So thank you for asking the question, and with that, let me invite Paul to make some comments. 2030.
2030. So I'm going to get back to changing the narrative, because I think the notion that we have, that aging is the one thing we have in common, unlike race or gender or political belief or country of origin. It's the thing that we certainly have in common, if we're lucky, understanding the stakes that all of us have in compressing mortality, morbidity, extending health span, et cetera, which means much more, following on Luigi's earlier comment, much more focus on prevention and wellness, beginning early in life, the life course approach to improving health, a better understanding of social determinants and the interaction between the characteristics of communities and nutrition and living conditions and all the rest, and the opportunities that science presents, the use of technology, AI, et cetera, to dramatically expand not just knowledge and scientific innovation, but I think just as important, the scope of people who can be touched by this.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I think this is one thing that for sure unites everyone. So thank you, Paul. Luigi, what would you like to add? 2030.
Well, one of them it's really related to what we already have. We already have multiple biomarkers that predict specific disease and multimorbidity. Imagine that we could take a drop of blood and measure all these biomarkers that we already have. And then we apply artificial intelligence to follow what's happening to these people. We will have an aircard system that learn over time and increase our ability to detect disease early in time by this biomarker. It would be a completely different medicine in the future if we could do that. And then the second practical, I think that there's the experience court was a study done by Linda Fried, where she looked at the intergenerational mutual health, where there were children that were falling in school, and then they hire or they recruited older people that could help them with their homework. And what happened, and was fantastic, was the children improved, but older people improve in their physical function, in their cognitive function, and those improvements could be detected with very, very solid measures, such as MRI, for example. So I dream that by 2030, our society will implement more of those collaboration between the different ages in our society for a positive, outcome for everybody.
Wonderful. So maybe as we're starting to reach the end of this important session and looking at the next agenda highlights, let me maybe invite you to share with the audience what they should be curious about, if there's anything on that program that caught your attention and that you're curious about, and that, just make sure that we signpost it for our audience. I'll take anyone's. Yeah, Kate, go ahead.
So the presentation that's coming up at 9 called Spotlight on Alzheimer's Disease, that has got a crackerjack set of people, and I think it's going to be a very interesting panel to hear what are the latest approaches and thinking, and how we're actually going to tackle what is, one of the largest, if not the largest, issue of public health in the West.
Thank you, Kate.
I would fully agree with that. I think that the attention and the curiosity about what's happening in the world of Alzheimer's disease is something that everybody should be curious about. As the aging of the population, this is going to be a huge problem. And then, it's for the people, but also for the society at large, for the family, for our healthcare system.
Thank you, Luigi. Paul?
Look, I'm just excited that people are talking about aging, and I think it's one of those things that's been an under-discussed and kind of underappreciated challenge and opportunity for the world. And whether it's advancements in bioscience or change in environments, or tackling both the terrible health challenges and the economic consequences of dementia, this is something that should be on everyone's lips, discussed around everyone's dinner table, and is something that every government and every company should be focused on. So thanks to WuXi for inviting us, and I hope this becomes a much broader conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I will add, I know I'm the moderator, but I have to interject on this one and just say the WuXi Forum, one of the wonderful things about the WuXi Forum is that it's a global forum that is really looking to bring learnings from all around the world. And I'm particularly excited about, hearing about the work done in Singapore, because what I learned from preparing for this session and from all of you is that it really takes a complete ecosystem that combines the hard science with the social science and really brings together many different stakeholders to think about every aspect of healthy aging and tackle those together. And let me thank all of you for sharing such important information. But beyond that, also the inspiration to actually get involved there, and to you, the many out there in the audience, I think you have some lessons taken from here that maybe will make you more curious about your own journey, your own life journey. But I will also invite you, whatever you're working on right now probably has some connection, whether it's biology, drug development, drug discovery, whether it's device, whether it's other aspects of science or social science. This is one of the biggest problems or challenges, and certainly an opportunity for your careers, for your purpose, and there is a lot to do. So with that, I am definitely leaving intrigued optimistic about the future, and again, very grateful to the three of you, Kate, Paul, Luigi, for contributing to this discussion. So thank you very much, and see you again.